Good day, everyone. We will begin the webinar in about a minute. Hello, everyone. My name is Varun Rawat, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. I hope you are safe, taking care of yourself and your loved ones. As we all know that the theme of today's webinar is Four Eyes, Robust Controls Simplified, where we will discuss the importance of having a robust control mechanism within the organization to stay compliant and improving the operational efficiencies. Next slide, please. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Audience lines are on mute to avoid any background noises and distractions. We would love to hear your questions during the session. You can type your questions in the question box in your control panel, and we'll answer the same in our Q&A section, which will be at the end of the webinar. This session is also being recorded, and we will share the recording of the webinar with the participants post the session. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague Paritosh, who will take us forward with the session. By the way of introduction, Paritosh is Senior Program Manager, Delivery Management Group at Path Infotech. He brings in 18 plus years of Oracle Technologies experience and have helped many organizations to transform their enterprise applications. I would now request Paritosh to take the lead from here.
Thanks, Varun, for introducing me with the attendees. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody who has joined today's webinar. As you all know, enterprise risk management is very vast subject. Business enterprises faces various kinds of risks. So our focus for the day to learn about operational and compliance risks. To make it more interactive session, we have invited industry experts to share their learning experience on the subject. In the last, we'll also wrap up with the demonstration of the solution and objectives around the solution. So brief agenda would be 4 Eyes principle, learning experience from industry experts, impact of operational and compliance risks, robust controls, objectives of the solution, benefits, and the demo case study. And in last, we'll be taking up the question and answers. 4 Eyes principle. 4 Eyes principle is also called as two-person rules or two-man rules. Basically, it is a risk control technique that requires two people to be physically present in the same place when an activity occurs. 4 Eye principle means that a certain activity, that is a decision or transaction, etc., must be approved by at least two people. This controlling mechanism is used to facilitate delegation of authority and increase transparency within an organization. Now I would like to invite our industry experts, Mr. Lokesh Agarwal, who is Vice President and having 20 plus years of experience in finance transformation, in advisory role, having rich experience in ERP implementation, building controls around enterprise performance management. Also worked as internal change leader for CFO CIO role and worked with leadership teams of external clients. Prior to joining with EXL, he's also worked with PwC, IBM, Accenture, and also part of global transformation projects in a leadership roles. Also, I would like to invite Mr. Pankaj Ratra, who is a oriented, passionate entrepreneur and a technology enthusiast. Pankaj has 29 plus years of experience working with organizations across industries and geographies. Co-founder and Director of Business Development at PAR, having deep fundamental knowledge of technology and market dynamics. Pankaj is respected in the industry for his business acumen, leadership skills, and overall business management. Pankaj, can I request you to share your experience around the 4I principle?
Yeah, thanks, Paritosh. And welcome to all of you for this session today. And uh, I'll be taking the session forward in collaboration with Lokesh, who really comes with a lot of experience in the finance domain. And Lokesh, at the outset, I'd like to thank you for our collaboration as a customer and a many a times consultant or a somebody whom we bounce a lot of ideas with. Over the last decade and a half, I think we have had a very good journey working with EXL as a customer. I really thank you for taking the time out and participating in the session today, and look forward to some interesting insights and conversation with you over the next 15-20 minutes. Um, so, Lokesh, I mean, I think the a very natural and obvious question to ask with the vast experience that you have of more than about 2.5 decades is to, and especially being in the finance function, which is considered to be the or always taken to be the, let's say, the custodian of the enterprise risk in any organization. Do you want to sort of start by sharing your experience on how, risk profile has changed or evolved over these years that you've been in the industry? When you started, I'm sure various companies were using manual or semi-automated, methods for bookkeeping, and now have evolved into using a lot of standard, integrated ERP systems. So, do you want to start on that note?
Yeah, hi, Pankaj. Hello, everyone. Pankaj, thanks so much for inviting me, to this seminar. I think it's indeed a pleasure to come and connect with the industry experts and share our experience, which I'm sure everybody in the call has an equally deep experience, and we all can learn so much from each other. So Pankaj, to your question, in fact, when you spoke to me about this, I kind of went in a flashback as to how things have, evolved over the years, right? So when I was doing my chartered accountancy, we were still those pre-ERP era days. ERP was just starting, and I think all these finance systems, they were either, I even seen some manual ledgers, by the way, at least in the factory setup. And even if they were finance systems, they were all very tightly, kind of firewalled with the rest of the organizations, right? So it is like very few people will control those systems, and because of that, they would be, I would say, a natural check and balance will be there. But as the ERP started coming in, things became more and more automated. A finance system will talk to a procurement system, will talk to an HR system, and that is where we found that the control has to be looked end to end. So for example, if you are having a very robust say an accounts payable process, but your procurement process is not very rigid, and you don't have a well defined authority matrix and who can issue a purchase order, it can always lead to a downstream impact on the AP processing. As things move further, what started that we should get into more and more a self-service kind of a scenario wherein an employee should be filling up his or her own T&E. Can a vendor submit the invoice through a portal? Can the customer actually, approve the invoices on their portal? So I think as we started extending the system and we started connecting our internal systems with an external system, again, that control mechanism had to be extended further. So clearly, as things are expanding, as we are becoming more global, the systems have to keep in pace with that. We have no choice. But the whole way to look at controls has gone through a paradigm shift, and I think that actually means that the risk have also gone up manifold.
Sure, makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, and I think having and like you said, and Paritosh also echoed that enterprise risk is in that sense a very vast subject. But I think like he did set the context by saying that okay, we'll restrict our focus on operational and compliance risk for the in the interest of time for today's session. So, do you want to share with us your perspective, or if you have, I'm sure you have an industry perspective on the business impact or cost of inadequate controls or non-compliance to that extent?
No, I think in today's time, the cost is quite significant. And when I say cost, it is both direct and indirect cost. So obviously, the direct cost would be that if there is any financial fraud, it straight away impacts the balance sheet or the financials of the company. There could be, an actual financial loss incurring. But I think more than that, it actually impacts the goodwill, right? Because today, most of the companies, they are either listed or they hold the shareholder value, and they are supposed to take care of that. I think once the shareholders or the stakeholders lose trust in the management of the company, it has got a much wider ramifications. There could also be penalties and jail as well to the finance directors or to the CEO. And I think in a long term it actually erodes the shareholder value, right? Because so everything is interconnected. In fact, today it's called an ESG company, which means that a company that focuses on environmental, social, and good governance. The study has shown that their shareholder value is always, has an incremental edge over the companies that don't adhere to these principles, while they may operate in a similar industry or similar scale and size. So clearly, good governance, with the right operational controls is something which is important, and it has got a significant impact on the long-term value of the company.
Sure. So we have, I think we have some data points that you're showing in context of the global cost of fraud and data breaches. Likewise, I'm sure there is a cost of regulatory compliance, or so to say non-compliance to that extent. So do you want to add something in that context, or we're good for now?
No, clearly. So I think there was a time, Pankaj, when companies would feel that should we go in for an additional controls or compliance? Is it really required? And I think if you look at the US geography, this whole Enron piece, it actually changed the way people looked at controls, right? Because one could see those big corporates, disappearing, within a matter of days because there were some serious financial irregularities. And there have been enough examples in across the globe, including in India. And the cost of non-compliance is far too significant for any company to manage. I think what you show here is a classic example that shows that what is the potential impact of non-compliance of the regulatory risk, whether it is you have to incur a small cost of compliance, right? Like for example, a typical fee to compile SOD metrics would require 4 times in a year. I see this as a manual process, right? I mean, because you cannot, SOD is a fundamental thing in any finance process, which is very similar to the 4I principle that you spoke about. And there is a cost that companies incur today. And if this process can be automated with the proper checks and balances, clearly it will add to much more value. Uh, Similarly, there is a loss, and then I think this talks about what kind of losses other companies have gone through when they were non-compliant. So I think this is a very potent data point, and if you look at all the chief account executives, they really feel that this is an important area. I mean, today the audit function has become so important in any organization. Those are days when you would feel that an auditor is someone, I mean, it's an unnecessary nuisance. But today the CEOs, they look at their audit officers to advise them as to whether the controls are in place or not, and they straight away report into the CEO and to the board. They maintain their own independence. So clearly, this whole thing is something which is being given the right priority in most of the organizations.
Sure, I think that's quite relevant. So we have a quick poll over here, and I would request Varun to run the poll for me, please.
Thanks, Pankaj. So I'd request the audience to take a few seconds and share the inputs over this poll question. I'll also read the question. Has your organization faced a fraud or had to pay a regulatory non-compliance penalty? Thank you so much.
So it's interesting that I think the audience that we have, most of their organizations have never sort of ever had to, face any such situation, which is quite impressive. It beats whatever we saw as a data point from a survey perspective that was done by a survey agency. But nonetheless, I think there are, which means that I think a lot of organizations or the people that we have in the group today have good controls to that extent. But I'm sure there are things which are changing in the world, and there are, as much as there are internal, there are some external risks as well. So Lokesh, given the sort of experience that you have with, like you said, you've seen the manual bookkeeping days to the ERPs to that extent. So why do you think organizations continue to face these risks to that extent? Any specific pointers or reasons, or top three reasons that you would say why organizations continue to face the risk?
Right. So Pankaj, the way I look at risk is, something which is a fraud that is visible, right? And at the same time, there are cases wherein there is certain leakage that can happen in the system, which is also to me a potential fraud, right? Like, for example, if there is any revenue that you need to realize and you are leaving that revenue because your contracts are poorly drafted and all, and this could be some fraud as well. So clearly, fraud could be both in terms of a visible financial impact as well as an invisible leakage that is happening. I think the reason why the frauds still continue to happen, or in the organizations today, so I mean, to put it more perspective, I think the risk of fraud still persists even in today's world. And to me, there are two or three reasons because of that. I think the first thing is that the way we kind of set up our policies. Those policies at times are not very well drafted. Say, for example, the T&E policy. Is it something that is all encompassing? It clearly defines what an employee can claim, what an employee cannot claim. Uses of credit card, can you mandate that? How do you ensure that the same bill is not being submitted by two employees when they claim their respective T&E, right? So clearly, what we have seen in many cases, the policies are not well drafted, especially when it comes to the employee claims. Similarly, the policies of procurement are not well drafted, and despite having a procurement function, people still circumvent that by kind of going in for a non-PO based purchases and all. So I think that is one area that I feel is there. The second reason, that the whole governance and control mechanism is not very well established, or it is not given the right priority in certain companies. And I think that I would say will be more in terms of the companies which are not publicly listed, which are more closely held, right? And that's where the governance is the thing. And also today, as we are getting more interconnected, there is always the risk of an external fraud. Somebody can hack into your systems and do certain things. And I'll give some examples what we have faced in our organization, right? So it happened with our controller that he receives an email from the CEO, right? The email looked as if it's coming from an Excel system, right? And it said that, Sandeep, I want you to immediately release this payment to this person, urgently, and it was like the tone was as if something that it has to be done now, right? And thankfully, we have got a lot of controls in place, and we our ISG team is very proactive, so we do keep getting trainings on all these things. And he could sense something is not right, and when he clicked on that email, the address, right, one could see that it is not something which is coming from an EXL, it is something which is outside, so there was a slight change in that domain, and one could see that this is something which is a clear case of potential fraud. So there are many such cases that we have seen wherein people are get these emails with very specific instruction, and it's as if somebody knows what's happening inside. So I think that's my way, that the risk is something which is all pervasive, even if the frauds had not happened. If you don't have a strong governance around it, and if you don't have a system-based control around the risk and the SOD controls, we are sitting on a threat, definitely.
So Lokesh, I'm sure in your experience you've seen multiple ERP systems to that extent, and do you want to share with us what you've seen as some of the scenarios where there is lack of control, or potential to plug in some of the gaps that do exist?
Correct. So the way I look at the ERP systems, Pankaj, is that they come with a lot of the inbuilt controls. So I think basics like, if there's a journal, the debits and credits should tally. If there's an invoice, you cannot overpay that invoice to the vendor. I think those basic controls are in place, which pertains to a specific transaction. But I think still, the whole, I think this whole marriage of policy, process, and technology is something which has to be done over and above any good ERP system. It doesn't matter what system you're using. So I'll give some examples. Say, for example, you have a policy of that an amount exceeding invoice exceeding certain amount has to be routed through a purchase order. Now, what if that invoice is broken into two or three, separate invoices, and these are being made non-PO so that they are compliant from the policy? So, can your system or can the intelligence identify that? We have a manual SOD that, okay, a person making the invoice cannot pay the invoice. But what if the person paying the invoice is actually doing the bank reconciliation also, right? Which means that if there's a fraud, he can potentially go and address that through the matching of the bank statement. So what I'm trying to say, clearly there are cases wherein the system gives some controls, but over and above that, one has to look at the SOD very specifically, not only for that particular sub-function, but an end-to-end. Things like manual journals, more manual journals you have in any finance system, it is prone to certain errors because it's quite possible you may pass a big adjustment entry without it getting properly approved with all the artifacts, because all those things have to be done manually. So clearly there are enough examples, Pankaj, that despite having the best of ERP systems, if you don't have an end-to-end view on the SOD and the policies and process, and that's where the system will not fail you, but the process will fail you.
Sure, I think makes a lot of sense, and some of the things that you spoke about, in that sense about the controls and the need for it. And I think you already gave some view on on my next upcoming question, which was more about as much as from the manual bookkeeping to a lot of modern ERP systems, and to as much as the technology has evolved, I'm sure the methods, that example that you took about, they have evolved to that extent. In the modern trends in business fraud, largely being around identity theft or phishing or expense fraud to that extent, in terms of not having appropriate. But would you, on this one, as much as you gave example of phishing, but then are there any, or identity theft, are there any more scenarios that you have experienced that you would like to share with the audience here?
Yeah, so maybe I think the previous slide was interesting, Pankaj. If I may just request you to go back to the previous slide. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So I think one thing that I would like to say here is that what happens that when we operate in a global environment, or when we are even in the India local, I think there are companies wherein they are fairly spread out. They've got multiple legal entities, multiple units, right? And every unit will have its own ledger as far as accounts payable or T&E is concerned. And the finance team is still a small team, right? I mean, you may not have too many people in the team. So how do you kind of maintain that? And I'm sure the segregation of duty is in place today in all the functions. But to ensure that that segregation of duty is as per the intent, to kind of manage that and maintain that, it's a significant effort, because you have to do it regularly. You have to see who has the access to what processes systems. So clearly, even to sustain this kind of thing today, it needs a lot of effort, because it has to be checked on a regular basis. People come and go, their role changes internally. How do we make sure that a person is being given the access as per the roles and responsibilities, and it has to be continuously monitored. So clearly, while the SODs would be in place in most of the organizations, but how do we ensure they adhere to the standards, and they are being regularly validated? So that's one thing I wanted to add, Pankaj, on this slide.
No, perfect point. I think as much as, like you said, and there are times when for various reasons in the ERP systems, I think you and I have seen enough times in life that there are some temporary reasons why you go and make change in the system and the responsibilities, but then there is not enough control to roll it back, and those potential risks can lead to a fraud to that extent. And and so in that sense, maintaining a consistent effort to review the SOD metrics and is very important, and I'm sure that's a subject that of interest to everybody, and organizations do enough to maintain that. So look, I think there is another, in the last 4 or 5 months, the world has become a very different place, and as much as we always, finance and some of the other functions were always considered to be the teams that can work only from office, but then the COVID-19 happened, the lockdowns got announced, and everybody was virtually forced to work from home, and this led to even there are a lot of positives coming out of it, but at the same time, I'm sure there is a need for the organization to sort of look at the controls in a very different way. And I'd like to learn from you to say what are organizations having to do from a controls perspective in the work from home regime. Is there a need to further enhance the controls? Are we good, or does the whole thing needs to be looked at any differently?
Right. So I think, Pankaj, you raise a very interesting point, because while controls is something which is given today, but I believe that this whole COVID situation, I think it will have again a big change as to how we would need to look at controls going forward. Because one thing is very clear, even after we are out of this situation, work from home is going to become, I think, a permanent feature in every organization. Even if a person is coming to office 4 times in a week, but one day of the week he or she is going to work from home for sure. And despite that, I think whatever work is being done, it has to be done. And we have seen organizations, our own organization, which is listed on the NASDAQ, we have done 2-quarter close sitting from our homes, right? I mean, and the data is extremely sensitive. There is no way it can go out of the people, who have the access. Even like, for example, I will not have the access to the data, despite my team managing all the data in the systems. So clearly, one has to see that the person is accessing the data, which is required to be accessed. Tools like as to what a person is doing on the official laptop. I mean, today there are tools available wherein you can see what a person is doing, what is the list of activities that he or she has done during the day. There are also I think technologies wherein the camera gets enabled and one can see that if you are working on any sensitive data, there is no one there is no unauthorized person nearby. So I think those kind of technologies are evolving, wherein which they ensure that a person is doing what he or she is supposed to do while you are not in office, and there is no unauthorized, I would say, access or the physical access to the work that is being done while a person is not at home. So I think, and this is something which will continue to evolve, because the initial focus was to enable everybody to work from home. But as these things now become a permanent feature, we are even in our company we are evaluating different things to see, okay, what all additional controls we need to bring in place.
Yeah, likewise, I think we did speak about it. Likewise, for our company, I think the tool or the capability that you are saying in terms of being able to, for the individual to see what he's doing on the laptop, and we've done it with a different perspective, which is about productivity. But I'm sure there is need to enhance the monitoring capability to be able to touch upon some of the aspects that you spoke about. So interesting. I think the world is changing, and I think all of us need to continue to keep changing and evolve with it to that extent. So it's a never-ending, pursuit for excellence and change. I think we'll have a quick poll over here, and I'll request Varun again to help me out with the poll. Varun, can you please run the poll for me?
Sure, Pankaj. So I would request audience to take a few seconds and share inputs on this poll question, which is, from what you have heard so far, in your assessment, do you see the need to further augment the controls, especially in view of work from home? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your answers.
So Lokesh, interestingly, I think when the poll started, we had almost like 100% score in favor of yes, saying that there would be a need for. But I think it stayed there. Almost 92% people from the people who participated in the poll said that there will be a need to further enhance the controls to that extent, which is a very big endorsement. And I think they relate with what you some of the scenarios that you spoke about. Interesting. So I think I'm sort of coming towards the end of my discussion with you. But any inputs that you would like to say or give feedback on the basis of the experience that you have, Lokesh, in terms of what are some of the changes that or some of the approaches that people will have to take, steps that people need to take to sort of stay compliant, or policies or approaches that they need to embrace to that extent. You spoke about various aspects or things that you've seen in the context of EXL doing, whether it's about training, whether it's about policy. So do you want to sort of give a quick snapshot of what are the maybe a few steps that every organization must take to improve its, I would say, operational risk or reduce risk and improve
Right.
compliance?
No, so I think there are 2 or 3 points that I would like to say, and it's nothing is new, but and I'm sure everybody would have seen that and would be the same view. I think the first thing is that this has to be looked at more end to end, and as you said at the beginning, that in most cases finance takes a lead in establishing the controls, because finance by its own I think nature of responsibility is the custodian of the of the numbers of the organization. It actually presents the true financial health, and that's the reason it becomes a natural custodian of the controls also. But having said that, today I think today the barrier between finance and IT is diminishing, right? In my own role today, I am part of finance, but I manage the finance IT, and I also have a dotted into the CIO of the company. So I think it has to be looked end to end. That's one thing I would like to say, that finance and IT have to come together to kind of understand where are the issues that need to be addressed, and if it can be addressed through an IT enablement, nothing like it, because that you completely eliminate the need for a human intervention over there. Secondly, the process policies have to be looked alongside the IT enhancements, because in most cases the policies have been found to be weak, and that is where it kind of impacts. And I think thirdly, this whole piece of as to if people are working from home, what more you need to do. I mean, like for example, if you're given laptops, is the hard drive encrypted? What if the laptop gets lost? Is the data secured or not, right? So basic things that are there today, which and then you also ensure that the employee is not kind of able to send any unauthorized data outside the laptop. So I think those are various level of controls that are being established today. And also I think in the end, any good ERP system will have a lot of inbuilt controls. I think it's the question as to how one can use it, and there are gaps. I think the SOD natural adherence is not something which is inbuilt in any ERP, and that's where if you can have certain things that you can optimize it or automate it, there are enough such I think opportunities. To that extent, one can certainly make the process more robust, and this is something which will keep evolving, and that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, one is from a system perspective, but I think you brought in a very interesting point, which is also, sort of mentioned over here, is in the context of regular training and orientation of the methods and new evolving risks that are the external threats that can come. So I think EXL does an amazing job in that context, and yeah, you'd like to share something specifically about that, or
Yeah, so I think the way we work is that some of these trainings are, so all our trainings are online. These trainings are mandatory. They're also linked to your annual rating and appraisals, right? And I think in between, our ISG team, they keep on doing these exercises, wherein they will actually push those phishing emails to see whether the employees are vigilant or not, right? So a lot of exercise keeps happening. I think in last 2 3 years, a significant amount of awareness has been created amongst us. And I think what we have seen, it also helps us in our personal life, because at times if you get any fraud SMS or any fraud email on your personal email, you get more cautious. You will not click on that, which earlier probably we would still do, because somehow it has been embedded into our DNA. So I think that is something which is very important, and every organization should actually look into it.
Sure, awesome. I think the last one was, I think, a bigger takeaway, that many a times a lot of us, don't realize that because of the roles that we play and the training and orientation that we get, I think helps us not just in the professional but in the personal lives as well. And I think you and I keep hearing about instances where somebody got duped because of you know you know not being aware that something like this can happen, and there are enough and more examples of that nature. So thank you, Lokesh. On that note, I really appreciate and thank you for you taking the time out and sharing your experience and insights with the team. And I think I would like to pass it on to Paritosh over here, and I think he has some solution that he is building and his team have built, and he would like to take a couple of minutes to talk about it, and maybe show a demo to us as well, and then we can circle back again. Over to you, Paritosh.
Thanks, Pankaj and Lokesh, for sharing your experience and giving us insight on the subject. So we understood causes of workplace frauds and trends, how frauds can be carried out within organization if controls are not in place. They are not robust. So one example is access to users are not reviewed on regular intervals. So frauds can be taken place. So today, to address these challenges, to overcome these challenges, organizations should build proactive monitoring and controls around the application systems which is being used within an organization, be it Oracle ERP, be it SAP or homegrown applications. So we'll be talking about the solution with the objectives wherein authorization is in place. We'll be checking the completeness, accuracy of the transaction which is being carried out in the system. Also, we'll be seeing the SOD implementation within the solution. So today we'll be demonstrating the process wherein a supplier is onboarded within an organization and how 4I approach is applied while onboarding the supplier. So while creating a supplier, we have developed the approval process. As a part of process, supplier will remain inactive until the approvers approve that particular supplier attributes and will not be available for the transactions. So the benefits of this solution would be approved supplier is being maintained in the system. We'll be doing the deduplication of a supplier based on tax registration number or based on the PAN number as well. And we'll also see how approved banking details of the supplier being maintained in the system. The feature of this solution would be there is complete audit trail will be recorded. Multi-levels of approval hierarchy can be maintained. So these solutions also can be approval mechanism can be built around customer onboarding, creation of chart of accounts, which is a backbone of financial system, user access, inventory items. So I'll be demonstrating the supplier onboarding process. I'll be taking help of Neeraj, my colleague. Neeraj, please help me with the demo. So Neeraj will be logging an Oracle ERP latest release version using the Ritu-K as a creator, and will be creating supplier using a standard supplier creation screen. So we create a new supplier. So for the purpose of a demo, we will be creating supplier in name of 4I's demo. Then he'll be maintaining the address of the supplier. So this is address screen where the supplier address is recorded. So with this, he has entered the supplier address details, and he'll be also assigning the operating unit. Now, Neeraj will be maintaining the banking details of a supplier. So here, Neeraj is adding the supplier bank details by selecting the existing bank, ICICI, also adding the branch details. And then he'll be adding the supplier account details. Now he'll apply all the changes which he has made. And now he'll also attach a cancel check copy which is provided by the supplier. This will help us So this is a cancel check which is provided by supplier. He'll be attaching this cancel check file with supplier bank details. It will help approvers to verify the details when approving the supplier information. So as you see now, this, Neeraj has created supplier and he has defined the bank information. So once he has defined the bank information, he'll also please apply the changes with it. So we see, please query the supplier. So still supplier site is inactive. It is not yet active. So at the same time, the notification will send to, so the system will send the notification to approvers for approving the supplier attributes. So now Neeraj will be logging from approvers login. So on the landing page itself, there is a notification bell in which approver can see the notification information. So here, within the notification, supplier information will be there, supplier name will be there, supplier liability account information, prepayment information will be there, plus the banking information which a creator has entered while creating the supplier. And also there will be an attachment which approver can see and verify the bank account details of a supplier. It will help him to take the decision whether the information can be approved or it can be rejected. We will please approve. Once approver has approved the supplier information, a notification will send back to a creator saying that supplier information has been approved and it is available for the future transactions like creation of purchase order, creation of supplier liabilities. So here a notification has been received by a creator wherein it says supplier has been approved to the site EBS forms. Thanks, Neeraj, for helping me out for the demo. So now I'll be taking about the case study. So this is one of the case study where we have implemented this solution. Canon, who is world leader in imaging technologies. Canon is using e-business suite version 12.13 and we are also helping them out to the upgrade to the latest release which is 12.29. So they were facing challenges, they were non-compliant, approvals were not placed while creation of supplier and modification, and also while assigning a supplier bank details, and no audit trail was in place. So with this solution, the benefit was SOX compliant and reduced risk of frauds, and it was a cost-effective solution. Varun, could you please help me out with the poll?
Sure, Paritosh. So I would request audience to take a few seconds and share the inputs on this poll question, which is, are you looking for efficient ways to manage your organization's operational risks and improve regulatory compliance posture? Thank you so much, audience, for submitting your responses. Over to you, Paritosh.
So then we will be taking up the question answer.
Sure. So thanks, Paritosh and Neeraj. Now we will go ahead and take some questions. Just a reminder to everyone, please be sure to type your questions in the question box in your control panel. Meanwhile, as we are receiving the questions from the audience, I would like to request our speakers, Pankaj and Lokesh, for any closing comments before we start taking questions.
Yeah, thanks, Varun. So Lokesh, maybe with whatever you spoke about and what we saw, what Paritosh demonstrated. I mean, it's obviously in the interest of time, he just picked up one very small area to sort of implement and demonstrate control from a supplier creation perspective. But then I'm sure there are many more opportunities and avenues to do that. So. Having seen what you saw, do you think there is some input or a closing comment that you would like to give over here to the audience?
No, Pankaj, this was really helpful, and I think what I see that these kind of innovations, which can help us to get two things. One is that how do we get better assurance on the control, because if there's a technology solution available, it would work as per the program, right? So the chances of errors are not there. And secondly, we should always look at, and I'm sure today, like, control is something which is omnipresent. Every organization, is very focused on control. But at the same time, getting that outside in perspective is very important. So, especially in these times. So I think every organization should keep focused on it. And this is something which will keep evolving because the technology are changing. The case study I saw that Canon is actually upgrading their ERP, and today many companies are thinking of even moving to cloud, right? So every time we change the systems or upgrade them, the controls have to be typically relooked or recalibrated. So that's something. It's an ever evolving journey, and if we can do any innovation, think of some bolt-on solutions that can eliminate the risk and optimize the effort. That's something which will be extremely important and useful.
Yeah, thanks, Lokesh. Varun, back to you for the questions that you may be receiving, and you can take the Q&A forward from here. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Pankaj and Lokesh. So we have a question from John. He's asking what method is used to build approvals. I think Paritosh, do you want to take that?
Yes, Varun. The method which we are using is a standard Oracle workflow. We hope that answers.
Sure. Thanks, Paritosh. Hope, John, this answers your question. We have another question coming in from Dheeraj. He's asking, do you have any mechanism to identify SOD conflicts?
Yes, we have solution around it by which we can build the SOD conflict matrix.
Sure. So hope, Dheeraj, this answers your question. We are getting another question from Ramesh. He's asking, is complete audit trial information will be available or not?
Yes, Varun, with the solution, yes, complete audit trail will be information will be available. Who's creating, at what time it is created, and plus the action histories of the approvals.
Sure. Thanks, Paritosh, for this answer. So we are having another question coming in from Sudeep. He's asking, do you see benefit in implementing advanced financial controls and advanced access controls on ERP? Are they beneficial, and are there any pre-work which needs to be done in an organization?
Yes, as we understood from today's session that yes, obviously by building controls, they are always beneficial. It will always reduce the risk of frauds. And yes, pre-work needs to be done before putting in controls in place. Hope that answers.
Sure. Thanks, Paritosh. Hope, Sudeep, this answers your question. So we have another question coming in from Manoj. He's asking, what is the timeline to implement such a solution?
For a specific master, it will take 2 to 3 weeks.
Sure. Hope, Manoj, this answers.
Varun, that's really a factor of the areas that we want to touch upon, but I think to the point that Paritosh was making, I think depending on the scope, but in a specific area, maybe in 2 to 3 weeks, the solution can be implemented.
Sure. Thanks, Pankaj and Paritosh, for this answer. Hope, Manoj, this answers your question. So we'll take our last question, which is that is it compatible with Oracle release 12.2.9 version?
Yes, framework is available with certain changes. It can be enabled. The solution can be enabled for the latest release, which is 12.2.9.
Sure. Thanks, Paritosh. Hope, Ritesh, this answers your question. Now we will move on with the presentation. For further questions, maybe we can connect with you separately and share the answers on those questions. Next slide, please. So with that, thank you everyone for taking the time out and joining us today. We appreciate you being here and hope you find the session interesting. For any questions or any further feedback, please feel free to write to us. You can mail us at varun.rawat@pathinfotech.com or gurvej.singh@pathinfotech.com. With that, we end the webinar now. I would thanks everyone for joining and making this webinar such an informative session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks Lokesh, especially for making the time and sharing your insights today. And thanks Paritosh and team for the nice demo.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks.